Hey, I'm Lisa. Do you have way too many thoughts? So many ideas, so many thoughts going on when you try to think about what to do. You have so many things come to you. Or even if you're looking at one thing that you're trying to do, you have so many ideas come to you about how to approach. So many that you can't choose anything. And it's very difficult to make any clear, rapid progress on anything at all because you're being bombarded by all these thoughts all the time. With ADHD, this is due to a particular network in your brain. It's a connectome, a particular collection of neurons that fire that are called the default mode network. The network that fires when you are thinking creatively, when you are imagining things, when you are thinking about the future, when you're thinking about the past. If you're generating anxious thoughts about the future, that's the default mode network. If you're daydreaming about great stuff that could happen in the future, that's your default mode network, DMN for short. If you're going over memories, things in the past, that's your DMN. If you are just coming up with ideas, lots and lots of interesting ideas, or if you're in the middle of doing something and you look at something and that triggers off a whole set of tangential but not really related ideas, that's your default mode network. And so with an ADHD brain, you have a very noisy default mode network most of the time. And this doesn't have to be a problem in itself. Kind of like if you're walking through a crowd and everybody is having little conversations all around you, they're all talking, but one person is talking with you as you walk through the crowd, then it's okay that 100 other conversations are audible by you because you tune in to the one person who's talking to you. You're not going to try to listen to all the other conversations. But if you do try to listen to every conversation that's happening at once, it's going to be incredibly difficult, impossible really, and very quickly overwhelming. And that's, to me, that is a bit like what it's like to live with an ADHD brain. And there's all this chatter going on, all these thoughts being generated that are not really relevant to the conversation that I'm having, the line of thought that I'm on. But I might hear something interesting and I get distracted and I start following lots and lots of other conversations. And then it can take a very, very long time to make one simple point. It can take a very long time to be effective at anything. Another metaphor I like is listening to all the thoughts that my default mode network is generating is like if I were a painter and I painted pictures, if I painted paintings. Suppose I worked, like my artist studio was full of like 1,000 different paintings that I was working on concurrently. Every time I went in to start to work on one, I could only work on it for about 3 seconds or 20 seconds before I would notice a different painting and then really want to work on that one instead. It would be really difficult to actually finish any painting. And if somebody walked into the studio and saw 1,000 paintings, all with a few dabs of paint on, they might think that I'd been doing nothing, or that they might just be very confused about what I was making, and they might never get an idea of what I'm trying to express, what the ideas are. because all the expressions around me would be so incomplete. Again, that's what it can be like to live with an ADHD brain when there's a lack of understanding about how to manage, how to navigate, how to really flow with the way the brain works. And for many, many years, I just thought that was the way I was, that I would generate all these different thoughts, and I was constantly following whichever thought felt the most compelling or interesting in the moment, the most demanding, and that was constantly changing. There was no real sense of clear priority. And so I lived that way for many, many years, and it was really frustrating. But there is a different way to live. It is possible to walk through a room where 100 conversations are going on, where 100 different people are talking, and you can hear 100 different people talking. I guess if it was 100 conversations, it might be 200 people talking with each other. But anyway, it's possible to be walking through that room and to stick with one particular conversation, one particular person, to have that intention and that clarity to say, this is the conversation that I'm on, this is the person that I'm listening to, this is the conversation I'm engaged in. It's possible to do that. And at different points, if something suddenly sort of seems to interrupt the conversation, something seems really funny or interesting or urgent, something's coming in, it's still possible to learn to say, right, even though I feel really compelled in the moment, really tempted to drop this conversation and move into this other one that has suddenly come into my awareness, I'm not going to do it because my intention is to stick with this conversation. And that could be for, a half hour or an hour. You can set a time that you're going to stick to that one conversation. Similarly, it's possible to walk into a huge studio full of loads of paintings that you're working on and just work on the one. And it's also possible to do things like cover up paintings that get really distracting, or turn them around, or position yourself so you're less likely to go off into other things. But if you can't help but see these other things that you're working on for some reason, suppose you have other people coming in and bringing paintings to you to look at, you can still make the decision to stick with one painting. Now, in real life, doing this with your thoughts, if you have ADHD, first of all, it feels incredibly unnatural and counterintuitive. It's a learned skill, but it's a really, really important learned skill. But it's something that each person has to learn for themselves in terms of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So that is the key. So for example, the other day, I was clearing up my room, and I'd been in the middle of a great big shuffle around in my house where I had pulled loads of stuff out of my younger son's bedroom into my room, lots of big furniture, big items, because I was redecorating his room and I had nowhere to put his old stuff. And the house is really small. There are no extra rooms or storage areas or anything. So that the living room and kitchen and hallway would still be usable by everyone, I just shoved everything into my room. And it made my room really unusable. And it stayed like that for a couple of weeks. And during that time, things got worse and worse and worse because I couldn't access anything in my room. So when I was working on any of my things, I ended up creating more and more and more stacks of things to organize because I couldn't actually access spaces to properly organize things. And so there's one day when I decided, right, this has gone on far enough, long enough. I'm going to, today, in this one day, accomplish something that seems impossible. Today, I'm actually going to create a completely clear room. So no piles of things on my desk or on my armchair or on the floor or on any surface. I decided this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go through as efficiently as I can. I'm just going to go through every pile of every random thing, and I'm just going to find the quickest, best way to clear the space in my room, to move that somewhere else, to place it somewhere which is a sustainable place to keep that thing for some amount of time. And it doesn't have to be the perfect place, but it does need to be aligned with my room being usable overall. So this was my aim. And I started doing this project for the day. And it was a big task. There was a lot to clear. And I decided before I began that my mantra for the day would be macro, not micro. Now, what this signified to me was that my vision for the room was macro. I wanted the whole room clear. I wanted nothing on the floor, nothing on any surface, nothing on the bed. I wanted to clear every pile of everything so that ultimately, on a macro level, spaces would be clear and things would be generally where they should be, or a good place for them. And that was the aim. So all day long, as I just dove headfirst into this task, I would pick up a pile of things and start going through things from the top of the pile down. And I would, as quickly as possible, designate a place for that to go, or put it in the place where it was supposed to go, because some things had a place. And if I ran into any blocks on the way, I would find the quickest resolution I could. And during that process, the temptation I kept facing over and over was, while finding a place for that one little thing to go, or while putting it away in the area where that thing goes, I would notice that, oh, that could actually be organized more beautifully. I could label all these things here, and then everything could just be perfect. They could be perfectly organized. The temptation was to stop and color code things and alphabetize things and put things in order and label everything and create these tiny little pockets of beauty and order. That's micro organizing. And I love micro organizing. If I were to have a place that were pretty much organized, it was done. But it was just like the little details that needed sorting out. So I would, open a box full of tops and I'd be like, oh, actually, these tops could be short sleeve going to long sleeve, or it could be just one season, or we could, do the colors this way. Like I would, and then they could be beautifully folded and they could, I would want to do that. That would be the urge that I had. But of course, giving into this urge would mean that there's no way I could clear the room. I would just be working on micro things all day long. And so at the end of the day, I would end up with 2 tiny shelves or drawers that were the most beautifully organized drawers or shelves that you'd ever seen in your life. But I would still have this problem with the room being unusable. And if I approached the task in this way, where I allowed myself to do a micro sort as I went along, it would become an indefinitely long task. I could probably work on clearing my room for weeks, months, maybe even years, right? And that was the way I actually functioned for many, 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 many years of my life. And I couldn't bring myself to do it any other way, because there's such a strong feeling of wanting to follow the impulse. You know, that notorious impulsivity, which is a marker of ADHD, one of the main markers of ADHD, that would be so strong and so compelling. And while that feeling was there, I would have nothing to counter that. I had no strong understanding to step in and say, hey, Lisa, this is just your ADHD brain that loves to microorganize. Leave that. Work on the macro things. And so understanding how my mind works now, which is something that I've come to in the past few years, which is unbelievable. I've spent most of my life to date just having no idea how to work with my own mind. But now that I understand it, I know even before I start the task that the temptation is going to come up, that in the moment it's going to feel really, really compelling. And even if I pass up that temptation like 10, 20 times in the day, I might still get sucked in by something at some point because it's coming up constantly. So I had to create this mantra for myself: macro, not micro, macro, not micro. And anytime I felt that temptation, anytime I felt that urge, that pull, that really, really strong impulse to like, oh, come on, I'm just this one little thing. I'm just going to sort out this one little thing. And while I'm sorting out that one little thing, I'm going to end up, going online to find the exact right storage container to organize that particular thing exactly perfectly. And that storage container is going to have these perfect dimensions and this many compartments. And I'm going to look online for 3 hours for something that perfectly fits this idea of this non-existent thing that I have in my mind. Like that whole huge problem, that whenever that came up, I was able to say to myself, macro, not micro. But do you know what? I love to be kind to myself. I love to indulge myself. I love to say yes to myself. And so when if a part of me just says like, I just really want to do this, I don't want to just be this crazy, strict, militant person to myself going, no, you just can't. I don't want to do that. And so even with the macro, not micro, I created a softener. And my softener was this. It was, hey, if it takes 2 minutes or less, this micro thing you want to do, go ahead. 2 minutes or less, it's okay. You do it and then continue with the macro. Or if you want to do a little thing towards this micro thing you want to do overall, you can spend 2 minutes doing it. And, once you're done all the macro, you can come back to it anytime. You can come back to any of these parts anytime and work on the micro. And so I had this going on. I had my mantra. I had my softener. And so the mantra was that sort of inspiring boundary and guideline that enabled me to stay focused when everything in my brain wanted to focus on lots and lots and lots of things. It's the thing that enabled me to focus on the one thing that I really wanted to accomplish that day. So that was my mantra. And the softener was the thing that allowed me to really feel my own understanding, compassion, empathy, so that I understood, okay, even though I'm imposing this restriction on myself today, I'm doing it with kindness. And do you know what? It's okay. Like, this isn't like something I have to be afraid of. It's not a terrible thing. These urges that I have, it just needs some regulation. That is all. And so I'm going to say yes, but in a way that is aligned with me achieving the big picture goal for the day, which was the macro sort. And so all day long, I said yes to me in this way, the aligned yes, which was 2 minutes or less, but I stayed on track. Macro, not micro. Macro, not micro. So I hope this helps you. This is like decades of banging my head against walls to discover how to harness my own imagination and brain, how to work with the power of my own brain to actually function and be able to do things that a lot of people take for granted that they're able to do. But yeah, to do it with an ADHD brain takes a little bit of understanding and a little bit of skill in terms of how to manage it in a different way. You need to understand beforehand, first of all, know yourself. Like, what's going to happen when you attempt to do this thing? What are the potential pitfalls for you? What are the potential blocks for you? What's going to come up? Okay, so those pitfalls and blocks coming up, how are you going to keep yourself safe from those things? How are you going to support yourself to navigate those things successfully as you go? And how are you going to be kind to yourself as you go? So what's your mantra going to be? Find a mantra that works for you. One that when you say it, when you hear it, immediately it reminds you of what you want, what your goal is, the thing that you want to be doing, and for how long. Pick your mantra and pick your softeners. Find out, how can I be kind to myself, and how can I say yes to myself in a way that doesn't self-sabotage? What little yes can I say to myself that's aligned with my bigger goal? And there you go. ADHD hacks. I hope that has served you. And I imagine that even if you don't have ADHD, this could be really helpful in the times that you experience something that's a problem for you, or a recurring block, or an issue. This could help you. Because of course, whenever we talk about ADHD symptoms, it's not like they're alien experiences. The difference is how pervasive it is, how difficult it is to choose otherwise, how difficult it is to not have that experience. So if that's the experience every time, every day, all day long, then it's ADHD. If it's something that you encounter every once in a while, when you're just when you haven't eaten well that morning or slept very well, or if you're just stressed about a few things, or, in some other way, just not completely in top-notch mode, cognitively, if that's what's happening for you, not ADHD, but you can still use some support and ideas and tools to get you through that. So hope that serves you. If it does, I would love to know. Please comment what you got out of this, how it served you, or anything that it's made you think about. That'd be great. Blessings.